Be nice if we could broadcast at all. Oh,
Oh, broadcasting sites brought to you by Google and all of its hassles to get us to a working Google Hangout.
yay.
Yeah, this sucked. This is the worst suckage Google's ever put us through. And that's saying a lot. This is the LinuxInstall.net podcast. This is episode number 130. We are recording on Monday, November 3rd, 2014. With me is my now faithful and not blowing me off to do another podcast co-host, Mr. Walt Giavec.
Woohoo! Yeah, that's right. I'm the only one with nothing better to do.
Well, Mr. Greg Martin was going to make a surprise reappearance on the podcast tonight, except that he has to be up at 4 a.m. Well, actually, he has to be in a town about 45 minutes to an hour away from him at 4 a.m. tomorrow, so he is sleeping, I'm assuming.
Probably, yeah.
It's 8:40 at night.
You know, it is Christmas already, so you're on Christmas hours at this point.
I'm on Christmas hours. Oh, because we fell back here in the U.S.? I don't know if everybody else fell back.
Well,
We fell back in the U.S.?
No, but if you've been in any store now, you can see all the Christmas decorations and or shopping paraphernalia is already out and about.
Dude, it was Christmas stuff up before Halloween stuff came down.
Yeah, just about.
Christmas season shopping for Christmassy stuff starts earlier and earlier every year. It's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough about shopping madness. What you been up to, Walt?
Well, let's see. 2 weeks out, I was contemplating, based on our continuous talks about the future of XFCE and the crazy discussions going along, not between us but other sites as well. I figured I'd give that what we used to call mate apparently is actually mate a try, and it worked out pretty good. I upgraded my netbook first to the new Ubuntu spin of Mate with 14.10 in all its glory, and it actually ran really good. What did I tell you? I had the full desktop up with a terminal, and I was using like 500 mega RAM.
Yeah, I think so.
Somewhere around there. Which, you know, for a full desktop that's not necessarily meant to be light, quote unquote, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I then decided, well, I let you borrow my netbook, so I didn't get to play with it too much. So I then decided to update my work machine to the same system so I could actually use it on a day-to-day. And, man, a lot of old GNOME 2.0 flashbacks. All the old widgets are there. All the old configurations are there. I dug up my old wallpapers and basically configured my 2007 workstation.
Now, is that a good or a bad thing in your opinion?
You know, once I got it all up and running, at first I was kind of like, oh yeah, I remember this, and it's not, you know me, I get bored real fast. I like, you know, that's why I'm the gadget guy, because I always got to have some new toy to be playing with. And my initial impression was, oh yeah, I remember all this, and I was kind of like, meh, you know, a little disappointing, because I thought maybe there'd be something cool and new. But once I got it all up and working, it didn't necessarily all come back to me right away, but it became comfortable very quickly, and there wasn't anything, I don't think, about XFCE that I missed at all.
That's good.
Yeah, the launcher, I like the new XFCE launcher a lot, but I really only use maybe 2 or 3 programs, so it was pretty easy just to make the shortcuts on a toolbar like I did back in the day. And you know, that was really about it. So very quick, as fast as you can, you know, move your mouse. System response is good. Haven't had anything crash. There's been a decent amount of updates though. I noticed because I'm still running XFCE on my home desktop, and there was 50 megs or more, I think, on the one, and then nothing on the other. So they're still definitely doing some tweaking as far as that new Ubuntu distro is concerned. It's not official yet, but there's been very positive response to the effort put in that I would be surprised if the next release wasn't an official spin.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, happy with that. And I was telling you just before the podcast, I was going to actually try to repurpose some old laptop. I got an old Dell 700M, and I thought, hey, I got the 32-bit still on a USB stick that I used to install my netbook. So I went to go and install that, and it said, sorry, your machine's too old. It doesn't have PAE kernel support. Which, for a 2 gig of RAM, 32-bit machine, you don't need, but apparently that's the default now. So I did a quick Google, and 11.10 was the last non-PAE kernel. So there's workarounds. You can do a force to make it boot, and then you can install the older kernel manually. Supposedly there's software settings on some of the Pentium M processors, which is what I have, that you can turn it on even though like your system BIOS doesn't allow you to do that. So I don't know if I'm going to really put in the work to do a little more research. It was more just some hardware I had sitting in the corner that I thought I'd see how it would run. Not so much that I'll probably use it.
I'm really surprised that the whole PAE kernel thing seemed like such a hack when they were doing it to begin with. And to see it now become the standard, it's like, if you want to use more than 3096 megs of RAM, then you should probably switch to a 64-bit OS.
Right.
The 64-bit OS is backwards compatible and runs all the 32-bit apps, so I don't understand why you wouldn't.
Yeah, and I mean most anything. I mean, heck, even is it 2010? I got the Dell Latitude 20. It's a 20. Well, the model's 2120. But it's still just an old Atom. And well, heck, I think the N330s were 64-bit if I remember right. But I know the 550 is, and that's a 2 or 3 year old machine. Low power. It's cheap at the time, so it's not. I couldn't see why you wouldn't run 64 really.
I don't know either. But it's just weird to me. And that they would take away support on the 32-bit version of the OS. I mean,
yep. Yeah, I can see like on the server spin that you would want that because in theory your servers would have all the extra RAM. But
right.
if you're doing a 386 install, it's probably because you got old hardware that's going to be underpowered to begin with, so you're not going to have maybe a gig in it if you're lucky.
But you're not going to run it as a server either.
Yeah, that too. Right.
Or anything production, at least.
Right.
I mean, I've been back being a consultant for 3 years, and I think it was at least 3 or 4 years before that we switched to all 64-bit Linuxes, even though we were running 32-bit Java applications, because 64-bit OS worked better for server hardware and we could take advantage of more RAM.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 32-bit JVM ran just fine, and there wasn't an advantage to running 64-bit JVM at that time. I still don't know that there is, unless you have an app that needs that much memory.
Right.
Because Java's not the best at. It's not the best memory manager.
No, it's not.
So,
yeah, that Dell 20, what was it, the 2650 or 2560, whatever it was that I replaced with that Progo plug.
yeah.
It was still a 32-bit Xeon, from back in the day, but that was the last machine that I've seen that wasn't 64-bit.
Yeah. See, now, you were talking before the show about needing a little heat down in your basement. You should have brought that 2650 home. That would keep that basement up just fine.
No joke.
Probably heat the whole house, to be honest with you.
Yep. Yeah, I would have tripled my electric bill, but dang, I'd be toasty.
Well, you get more use out of it than the furnace,
This is probably true.
maybe,
And propane free.
and propane free. So, anyways, so is there anything else?
No, I've been. I mentioned it's not necessarily Linux, but on my old Sharp Zaris, I've been compiling stuff for OpenBSD 5.6, which was in beta until November 1st, where it's officially released, and all the binaries that I spent weeks and weeks compiling are now just available as a package download. So, meh. It was fun. I was messing with 3 other guys, and one of them actually does some upstream production. So there were 1 or 2 things we figured out that he posted for him. We're not 100% sure that it made it in the 5.6 release or not, but yeah, at least it's something known about, and hopefully it'll get fixed in the next one if it wasn't here. I haven't had time to actually install the update yet. I'm still running the beta because I'm building a pole barn, and that took pretty much my last week's worth of time getting all the details of that straightened out.
See, you're building pole barns while I'm replacing sump pumps.
Yes.
Folks, if you don't have a house yet, think long and hard before you buy the house at the bottom of the hill. Just saying. Didn't seem like a problem at the time because the hill seemed a far ways away, but no, I'm at the bottom of the hill, and there's lots of water where I live. We're definitely not in a drought. Matter of fact, in the 7 or 8 years I've lived here, we've had 1 drought year. I'm missing that drought year because I could do a lot of work to fix the water issues if I could just get the ground to dry up.
Yeah.
But,
or even the house on the hill with the high water table. That's not so great either. That's my situation.
Yeah. So, anyways, so the sump pump just shafts break, metal fatigues when it's running I think it's running about every 15 minutes. It tends to wear stuff out over years. So I'm back on my backup pump, which I then had to replace the switch on, which is why it was the backup pump to begin with. But I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm going. First of all, every time that damn pump kicks on, the lights on the same circuit dim.
Right.
So you'll be in the shower and thinking you're having a stroke because the lights just dimmed. And it's like, was that the lights? Oh, no, that's just the sump pump kicking on.
I think semi-officially it really should be on its own circuit.
And if you look at the wiring, it looks like it's on its own circuit, and I don't know why. It happens to be right next to the lights for the bathroom, which I think is why. It's weird how the proximity works, but the breaker for the bathroom is the next breaker. And for some reason, it's affecting it. It shouldn't, by all rights. It should not affect it at all, but it does. So I've been thinking for some time about trying to build some kind of circuit that'll ramp the power up slower, so it's not just instantly on. And so I was going to build I have this whole solution built in my head that I've never tried to put on paper, where I, did research and found water sensors for depth. I even thought about using either an infrared, although I'm not sure that'll work well off of water, or an ultrasonic rangefinder to detect how high the water is inside the sump. In case you haven't noticed, this is becoming a really overcomplicated solution, but kind of the fun of it. How much overbuilt can I do it? I get the overbuilding from my father.
Because a little float on a string would be too easy.
The float could eventually start taking on water, and then it wouldn't really be floating. And how would I know?
True.
See, with the ultrasonic rangefinder, I would know exactly how far the water was going down.
That's true.
It would give me some other measurements that a simple ball would not. Yeah, that's the excuse, and I'm sticking with it. But more, I wanted to do some other stuff. But I really would have liked to have known that the pump that died, well, the pump didn't die, the shaft broke, I'm assuming, because the motor was just spinning. I'm assuming where that shaft broke on the other pump, well, it had broke probably several days ago because there was a lot of water built up. And I would like to have known that several days earlier, like Thursday night when I came home from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And, could have worked on it after going to trick-or-treat instead of scrambling during my lunch hour on Friday to make sure I had all the parts I needed so that I could replace it. If not, decide whether or not I was taking the afternoon off.
Yep.
It sounded like fun. But it's all fixed. It's all good. It didn't really impact me not doing this stuff with Linux. But the big thing that I did with Linux, besides trying to figure out how to control my sump pump, the big thing I did with Linux was video editing this week.
Yeah.
I went to this. Oops, you can't see it.
There it is.
It's totally washed out. Anyways, that says Ohio Linux Fest. And at the bottom, you'll see that says I was a speaker. My son wore this to school today. I was very proud, although absolutely no one knew what Ohio Linux Fest was. But, they're teachers.
Yep. But it came back spaghetti free, so that's a bonus.
It did. It came back completely cleaned up, mostly because a teacher decided as soon as he got there that it was distracting and made him put it in his backpack.
Right.
So I started looking for solutions to video editing. I've looked at them before. They're either way too complicated and more than I want, or not easy to figure out. I tried Pivarti or Pivarti, and couldn't figure out how to do anything other than make cool animated graphics, which isn't what I was looking to do. I wanted to edit the video.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was out. So then I had to uninstall it, and then I had to make sure I got all the cruft that it installed with it off my machine also.
Right.
Which apt is getting much better at, I have to say. So then I installed OpenShot and spent a long time trying to figure out how I could do transitions from the video of me to my slide, but it would do the transition and then go back to the original video.
Oh. So it complete the transition, then just switch right back instead of staying on your slide.
On my slide.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, maybe it's because I didn't put a transition back, and it's smart enough to know that once you've made the transition, stick until you make the transition back. Yeah, that wasn't it either. So after much playing around and several searches on the internet, by the way, if somebody wants to do me a huge favor, if you know of an OpenShot video editor tutorial, please send it to me because they don't seem to exist beyond showing you how to do, again, really cool animated graphics, which is pretty useful when you're trying to edit video. But I eventually figured out that if I cut the video, turn off the video but left the audio, which is what I wanted, it would stay on the slide until I did a cut. I did a cut on both sides of where I wanted the slide to be, and then cut it again, and then it would transition back, and that worked fine.
Hmm.
Except for the fact that it's a really long process.
Right.
And I'm pretty long-winded. I don't know if anybody's noticed that or not, but I like to talk, especially when I'm in front of an audience. So yeah. So I'm going to be video editing this week, and I will have my talk up from Ohio Linux Fest.
Yay. Since I missed it.
By the end of the week. But that's what I said last week too.
Yeah, I know. I was looking forward to the recap last week, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. Working for a living sucks. I need to be independently wealthy.
Yeah, and then you can adopt me.
No.
Come on, man.
That puts that independently wealthy level a lot higher than if I just support myself and my wife and our kids. I don't have to leave the kids anything. I just have to support my wife and I, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but that's what I did. But let's continue talking about Ohio Linux Fest because that was cool.
Oh
And
no! Last minute, I had to bail because of the stupid barn project. Disappointing.
well, yeah, you know, it's life as a homeowner.
Mm-hmm. No more fun for you.
Almost as good as life as a parent, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
And you have no money.
Right.
So you
And
have
no
no life
fun.
and no money.
But I will have a barn, which is somewhere I can
Hide
hide.
in.
Yep.
Good move on your part. Kind of
Yep.
jealous. Anyways, so Greg Martin, who was also presenting down at Ohio Linux Fest and was supposed to be with us, but as you heard in the intro, he's got this little work thing, and he's got to be up and at work at 4 o'clock in the morning. So he's like wimping out on us and going to bed. Like, who needs sleep? You'll sleep when you're dead.
Right.
I mean,
2 words. Coffee.
I was going to say monster, but
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
um, there'll be links to the show notes to the slides from our presentation. He didn't videotape his. I should have done that for him. I didn't. If I was a nice friend, I would have done that.
Well, that was going to be my job.
Yeah, but yeah, you bailed on us.
Yep.
And for some reason, I wasn't thinking about it because it's not like I needed to do anything other than start up the video camera and then stop it at the end. But
I don't know, man. That's a two-step process.
it is. It is. It it was cool. I mean, it's the Ohio Linux Fest. There's lots of people there talking about open source and loving on the open source stuff. Um, it felt like there were less people there this year.
Hmm. I think I heard 300 to 400.
Yeah, that's a lot less. There was, I mean, there was a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, but it felt like less people this year. It didn't. It was just crowded. I don't know.
From I mean all the demos and speeches I heard were almost standing room only for a lot of them.
And yeah, I don't think they picked right when they picked rooms for talks. For instance, my talk probably should have been in a smaller room.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, that could be too. Yeah.
some other talks, well, and then where they did the keynote, right? So everybody wants to see the keynote, but it wasn't in an exceptionally large room. So it was massively standing room only,
Ugh.
which was kind of crowded and uncomfortable. A lot of the other speeches seemed crowded. They didn't feel like they had as many big rooms. But they also had 8 tracks going, and I think that was just too many.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I don't want to see a lot of people. Not that I didn't want the opportunity to speak, and I didn't think that others should get the opportunity to speak. But it, I think it really thinned out some of the crowds for some of the talks that probably would have gotten more. One of the guys that was talking at the same time I was, we looked at each other and went, "I really want to go to your talk," and he goes, "I know, I want to go to yours too."
Right.
And I'm like, "This really sucks."
That was common. A lot of people said that they had to make some decisions this year that, they would have loved to hit more than what they could do.
Right. Like there were a lot of dev related talks going at the same time. Like I was doing DevOps, I was doing a DevOps talk. The guy that I was talking about did the Git system management with Git, which I'm like, wow, that's a talk I think probably everybody that was in my talk would have liked to have seen too. Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
you manage that with that talk? There was one opposite the other two that I was going to support. So I was going to support Door to Door Geeks podcast
Right.
and Greg's podcast or Greg's his presentation. So that took me out of 2 sessions plus my own. So I had 3 sessions where I couldn't really go do anything, and um, I went to a session right before mine and sat there for most of the time. But I had to leave about 15 minutes early because I had to get ready for my presentation. And I went to one before Greg's, and I again had to leave about 15 minutes early, which kind of sucked because it was really good. It was about salt.
Oh yeah.
Also, very disappointed that they aren't recording any of the audio recording any of the podcasts at the very least.
I was gonna say that too.
Because then at least I could have gone back and heard these presentations this week
Right.
or the last 2 weeks. I could have caught up on what the presentations were. I'm publishing mine. Door to Door Geek's publishing his. Greg already pushed his out. So you can find Greg's if you go look at Greg Martin on the Google Plus. If you find the right one, there'll be a link to his stuff on the show notes.
Yeah.
But you can find his presentation. Now, Greg's presentation was Android development on Linux, right?
Yep.
And mine was management, what's DevOps, where do we begin? So I did my presentation kind of a little unusually, not really that unusually. I've seen other people do it. I got a recommendation from a friend of mine when we were walking through my slides about a week before my presentation. Hey, you should probably ask questions in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, define what it is and then start off with questions. And so that's what I did, because when I was doing the presentation and we were talking about the slides that I had, even though I wasn't writing the words, it depends, I felt like all my answers were coming out, it depends. It depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends. So it depends on your company, what your situation is. There's a whole bunch of things and markers and stuff that you need to think about. If you're a 4-person company, like one of the people in the audience, he's in a small startup, there's only 4 developers. How do they start that? Well, you don't have any ops to work with. So the ops part of DevOps isn't there. That means one of the devs is really acting as an ops person. And I advised him that you really should be making management clearly define what the goal is, because that's going to be important for them, because there's only 4 of them. And if they don't understand what the goal is, they could be developing based on what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, you weren't moving. So,
Moving.
And then you go from him to another guy who basically is stuck in the middle between dev and ops, and he's really doing what I would call release management, but management has decided to title his group DevOps. And I said, well, use it to your advantage and twist the situation and make it become DevOps. Pull in the devs and the ops people. That's kind of your role. Pull them into the same room, get them to start talking to each other, and help smooth that process out. And eventually, you can go back to whatever you came in a way, and just be the leader of the DevOps practices and that kind of stuff. But he's in a much larger company, so it goes that way. So when you see the presentation, hopefully you'll get something out of it. There'll be a little bit for everyone, because I did get a pretty wide variety of questions. Everybody seemed to like my answers, but you know what? My answers are my opinions, so if you don't like them, then go form opinions of your own.
Right.
Because I don't have all the answers, but I have answers that I like and that work for me, and that tend to work for the companies that I work with. So that was it. Let's see. The other presentation I saw was on using SaltStack in a very secure environment, which was pretty cool. And he explained why he chose SaltStack over Chef and Puppet. And there's a whole bunch of reasons. A lot of it had to do with it was easier to get to work through a firewall because there's no master server that everything needs to talk to. Or that you get the real benefits when everything can talk to the master server, basically. So it was cool. Again, wish there was a presentation I could link everybody to.
Yeah.
See, I can link you to his slides, but he was a good presenter, so his slides don't contain a lot of detail.
Right.
I didn't look at his. Maybe he put his notes up there, but I kind of doubt it. Everybody's just doing this on a volunteer basis. So he did that. The other one that I saw, what else did I see? Well, I saw Doors and Stephen did his now second or third run at podcasting on Linux.
Right.
He really didn't he really didn't changed too much from last year's, which is fine, because if you've never seen it, it's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
chock full of great information. If you want to know how to podcast on Linux, you should listen to his podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah. We went last year and it was great.
Yeah,
I went last year.
the only thing I have a problem with is description of microphones, but that's okay. He and I decided to agree to disagree. But
Yep, because we're both using what he's not supposed to use.
well, no.
Pretty good.
Well, I am this week because for some reason my mixer doesn't want to work. But he really, yeah. It's just, I don't care if you use a dynamic mic. I don't care if you use a phantom powered mic, is what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the proper term? Is condenser? Yeah, it's a condenser mic.
Yeah, because they are phantom powered.
Yeah.
Which is what I got right here.
Right, and I have one here. He likes dynamics because there's less clipping, basically. Excuse me, basically is the thing. And there's less clipping because your voice is what has to power the microphone. I like phantom powered mics because you can get little boosts out of it and you can tweak you have more tweaking you can do on the microphone itself and in the board.
Mm-hmm.
So just you have to understand how to do the tweaks too. I'm also using a much more expensive board than he was demonstrating, but if you're just starting off with a podcast, don't spend a lot on a board.
Yeah.
I happen to have had a high school where I got taught how to use actual real equipment, and so I know how to tweak all the little knobs to make myself sound better. Not that it's that difficult, but if you don't understand what the stuff is on the board, then it's probably too much board to buy the cheap one. Cheap ones work really well.
Yeah, I got this little $50 one. It works really nice. Doesn't have hardly any knobs, but I didn't know what most of them did anyway, so.
Let's see. What else did I see? Greg's presentation was really, really good, and he got a lot of good feedback.
Yep.
He got a lot of people talking to him about it and asking him what his advice/opinion was.
Yep.
And he is actually getting a lot of great feedback.
Yeah, that's good. I know. I was disappointed because somehow he only managed to record half of his presentation.
Yes, he did.
And which was, I guess, half more than he thought he got. So I managed. I listened through, what was there, and I thought it was really good. Would have liked to have gotten the whole thing, of course, but it is what it is. But yeah, I know he originally I think he put it up on like Google Drive, but people were having issues, so he republished it on a actual audio broadcast, something I forgot what it was, and then he put all the slides up too. So
I should have told him to put it on SoundCloud.
That might be what he did. I forget. I actually got it when it was still on Google Drive, and I saw he post on Google Plus that he had re-put it somewhere else so people could get to it easier or better, or it fixed whatever drive was having issues with.
Right.
But yeah, that was good. I mean, there was enough things there that I would have same thing. If I would have made it. Well, I know last year, UI and Brian had went, and Greg, or Joe rather, and we all went to basically the same presentations, and we were talking this year if we all made it, maybe we try to split up a little bit so each of us would get one, and then we can talk and discuss and share a little bit better afterwards. And then, of course, Joe wasn't able to make it, and I wasn't able to make it, and you guys were busy with your actual events, so it didn't work out quite as good as planned.
Yeah, because I was even going to chase you guys away from my talk. Like, just have maybe one of you help me out with my talk, and the other ones go hit some other talks if you want to go see something, just to get some more background on what other stuff was going on. Because, like I said, there was 8 tracks going.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why, at the same time, maybe that's why it felt like there were fewer people than last year. Because the rooms weren't small, and they were all pretty well attended.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the presentations were.
Yeah, I think did we have like three? Was there three at every hour that you chose from last year? And this year it was four,
Yeah.
if I remember
There
right.
was more than four. There was.
Well, not counting the learning tracks and stuff, there was just the four. Whatever the different groups they have them separated in. I think there was four regular ones, and then you had like at least one or maybe two of the learning tracks if you were doing that. Continued from Friday.
Let's see. Schedule. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Earthquake.
9. There were 9 tracks going. Oh, sorry, 8 tracks going.
Yeah, that's probably right.
There were 8 tracks going this year, and last year I think there was 5 or 6. So they added a couple of tracks this year. But it just made it too hard to pick what to go see.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they wanted to accommodate as many speakers as possible. They had asked me if I would have a backup presentation in case somebody showed, and I took the time to create one. Not upset about not having to present 2 presentations, but basically when I got there, they were like, we got so many presentations. Sorry if somebody backed out at the last minute, but there's plenty of other options. Go find something else.
Right.
Thing. Oh, that was the other thing that I missed out. I didn't get to go see Catherine Devlin's presentation this year. Which
What was she doing?
The one who did the Iron Python one last year that we.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't get to go see her presentation for some reason. I think that was because Greg was. Yeah, that was
Greg's. Yep. Yeah, I think you're right because I was thinking the same thing that I wanted to record Greg's for him, but that would have been the one I would have picked otherwise.
But there was his, and then what else was there? His had that one that I wanted to see. Stephen Doors, what was going on at his time? Oh, I wanted to go see, even though I know a bunch about Docker, I wanted to go see what somebody else's thoughts were on the introduction to Docker.
Yep, me too.
Didn't make it to that one.
They had, what was the new desktop for BSD? I forget what hour it was at, but I know I wanted to see that, but I ended up installing it myself in a VM just to goof around a little bit.
Oh, and then there were some really odd ones, and this is part of my criticism. So there was, where is it at? ColdFusion. There was one on ColdFusion, which is not open in any way, shape, or form, and barely runs on Linux.
Right.
And is dying, as far as I can tell. I don't know any companies that are rolling it out. Everybody moved away from that. I mean, I still see ColdFusion URLs, which are heinously bad. As an ex-SiteMinder administrator who had to try to figure out how to map regular expressions to meet the stupid things.
Right.
They're still horrible, just as bad. But somebody had a whole presentation trying to get people to use it. And it's not like there's an open version of it. It's not like somebody created a new version of it. It's not there. There was a couple other presentations that were like that. They were like very clearly closed source solutions trying to run on, running them on Linux.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even some of the newer products, that's totally a side note, but like I was looking at a media server project, which is kind of like a Plex backend, but without the Plex client.
Uh-huh.
And they just said, oh, well, we have a beta release for a Linux server. And I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to try it out. Well, the first thing you got to do is install Wine. I'm like, well, you're not really running it on Linux. You're just running the Windows version on Wine. I'm like, that's not the same thing.
Yeah. So there were some other ones that I wanted to see in the system administration track that were just conflicting with other presentations. And it's just the presenters that I saw were good, and I didn't go see the ones that I'm questioning their legitimacy. But it kind of, I don't know. I think they tried to push it too far. And Greg and I caught a rebranding discussion in the speaker's room and pretty much walked out and went, wow, you're that not committed, is the way it felt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and he introduced himself as the leader of the event. And I went, if you're not committed, then stop doing it. It's
Right.
volunteer. You're not getting paid. So if you're not committed to it, you should stop doing it. And he didn't sound like he was committed to it. He wanted to do a totally different, all open source focused thing. And he's like, well, we should rebrand it to an open source event. And it used to be an open source event. Like, it used to be a focus on open source. And there just didn't seem to be. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd show. I mean, some other people commented too that there was another show going on at the same time, and I can't remember what the name of it was now. Another Linux show, just somewhere else, in like another state.
Uh-huh.
And as comparison, like the vendor room that Ohio Linux Fest had set up, there were maybe 15 vendors, 14 vendors, something like that.
I'll be surprised if there was that many.
If
But
even
yeah.
that. And at this other show, there was like over 40.
Well, like,
And I was disappointed with that last year too, that there really wasn't a whole lot of, it was definitely more, speech or presentation oriented. And if a couple companies wanted to come and set up a table, they were kind of like, yeah, we got this room for you, go for it. Versus having something organized where they would have brought either, and it didn't necessarily have to be hardware. I mean, it could have been local user groups or clubs or,
Yeah, there were no clubs that I saw in there like there were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that there weren't any, but it was the ones that were there were big corporate enterprisey things.
Right.
Oracle
Right.
being there. Not that I don't have any problem with Oracle being there, but balance it out. Have Oracle there, but also have other groups, other smaller businesses. Chef was supposedly there, but I didn't see any chef representation.
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times I walked by the chef table, which was kind of disappointing. And so, there was nobody there from Puppet, for instance. There was nobody there from SaltStack. There was nobody there from Linode was there. There was nobody there from Rackspace. There was nobody there from Amazon. With all the stuff that Amazon Web Services does. This would have been a great show to show off what you can do. IBM, for some reason this year, didn't make a showing.
Oh, wow.
Which was a big miss to me. It just didn't feel like anybody spent the time to go out and try and recruit vendors to come be at the show.
Right.
Or for some reason, and I thought it was because they weren't letting vendors talk, but Cover My Meds was a sponsor, and there's a presentation I'm looking at right now, which is open source at their company, which I think is a fine thing. I mean, honestly, I think you probably should have dropped one of these other tracks and made a track that is literally just vendor talks. Let the vendors talk about their products.
Right.
So if I want to go hear their dog and pony show, let me go sit for an hour or or break it down into half hours, whatever they want to do presentation wise, because maybe they don't have an hour presentation.
Sure.
Have hours to sit there and talk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I didn't see that there.
I mean, and along that same note, not only did I think they didn't really market or go out of their way to find a lot of vendors, I don't think they did a whole lot of marketing for the show in general.
Other than the social media stuff, I didn't see anything.
Yeah, and I didn't even see a lot of that. The only reason why I knew it existed is because since I went last year, I got the email. If it wasn't for that, I didn't see it anywhere. I mean, they could have easily, put it out on some of the higher end, um,
They could have
either
spent some money to put it out on some of them. I did see it on
yeah.
Google Plus quite a few times because I was following Ohio Linux Fest.
Well, right, but I
Um,
mean, if you're not following them though,
it showed up in a couple of my LinkedIn groups,
okay,
but
that's not bad
once
then.
once or twice, so
But
not
again, I mean, they
like.
could have done, local user group flyers. They could have done magazine, just a little blurb, and Linux Journal or something.
Mhm.
There's a lot of other things I think that probably could have happened
Yeah.
because there had to be more people that would have came, if they would have known.
Well, and it's not like people didn't just naturally promote it too, because we were talking about the guys from last Linux Action Show um, came out. Chris Fisher, not all of them, but Chris Fisher and his
Yeah.
wife,
Yep.
and they brought some cameras, and they for some reason only interviewed vendors. That's
Right.
that's another really weird call on their part, unless the vendors were paying them, I guess. But I don't think they were. I think they just promoted them.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think so.
Um, it was interesting not that they chose not to interview people. I mean, that's the keynote for this was John Mad Dog Hall.
Mm-hmm.
He's huge in the Linux community, and you should have been just promoting the hell out of him. And the other two keynotes weren't slouches. Ruth Schul and Ken Starks are not. They're not slouches. They're not low end people to be having at your event that you shouldn't or should promote.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I don't know. I kind of felt like it was good, but maybe I was just too distracted. Maybe it was better than I thought. Maybe I'm just being too harsh, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought they could have got some more vendors in there that would have given them the money to sponsor recording all the talks. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is the 12th year this has been going on. And I went to Devops Days in Pittsburgh, and all the main keynotes and all the main presentations on both days at Devops Days ended up being recorded, produced, and put online.
Yep.
And okay, there was less talks going on at one time, but there was also only 300 people.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, let's be honest. How hard is it just to get a guy with a smartphone to hold it up for 30 minutes while somebody did their presentation? Bare minimum.
right,
It didn't have to be high quality or big production or anything. And then again, not all facilities do, but the majority of hotels that are capable of hosting these things do actually have some capability of at least PA systems that were being probably used for presentations. So it's not that hard to take a feed from that even to an old tape recorder and be able to record the speech, like you said, at least in audio.
yeah. I mean, at least audio would have been nice. And this is the 12th year, and they're still not doing that. I think just the level of what's expected out of a set of talks is important. And I can understand if it was some of the smaller talks you couldn't quite hit everyone. There's 8 going on at one time. Okay, maybe you can't get all 8, but the bigger rooms, like I was in a double room. Any of the ones in a double room definitely should have. If you thought they were important enough to put us in 2 rooms, then they should have been important enough to be audio recorded at the least,
Mm-hmm.
video recorded at the best. And just didn't, if I hadn't done it, if Stephen Dorr hadn't done it or Stephen McLaughlin, Door to Door Geek, if he hadn't decided to do that for his presentation, it wouldn't have gotten done.
Right.
And it's kind of funny. He was in a smaller room than I was, which was weird.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, he should have been the bigger pull.
It should have, but what do I know? Um, my talk was very niche, so I wouldn't have put me in as big a room as they put me in.
Right.
They're just, how many people really wanted to hear about DevOps? Now, I got a
Well,
lot more people than I thought. I had probably 40, 45 people in the room. And they were very engaged, but, It's just that was the way. I was also a lot of the way I crafted my presentation was to make
Hmm.
people have to ask questions. So I kind of forced engagement for
Right.
as much as you can. But anyways, all right, enough ragging on it. It was a good show. If you get a chance to come next year, definitely come out.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, still gonna go.
it was still good. It was still worth it. Um, I saw people having a good time all day, talking tech, talking geek. The
That right
conversations,
there. That's totally worth it. I mean, even
yeah,
not to say that the presentations were bad or that there wasn't any vendors to see, but you're in a place with hundreds of people that do the exact same stuff you do, and you just talk geek. Nobody's gonna judge, and they're actually gonna be able to follow what you say versus that blank stare your wife gives you. And you might
well,
make
and
a
not
couple
just
of friends or build some relationships. I mean, that's what the show's worth for me, and that's why I was most disappointed, is I wanted to meet all these people and I didn't get a chance to.
yeah, it's not even the you were saying, people not giving you the blank stares. It's people that you meet that are just as amped up about whatever tech you're talking about.
Hmm.
Whether it's, us talking to people about hacking pogo plugs and how much fun it can be, or me talking about DevOps, or, other people doing all these other things, these other talks, doing podcasts on Linux, Android development on Linux. Man, there's a pack of people walking around before and after Greg's talk talking about Android development and Linux that had all found each other. I guess overhearing each other talk from other development talks in the track, but they get to this and they're all walking up. Oh yeah, are you gonna go to this one? Yeah, I'm gonna go to this one, and they were all walking over to Greg's presentation, and it was really cool to just go, wow, look at this, and
Hmm.
I was really proud. Greg did an awesome job at his presentation, and there were lots of people there to listen to it. So definitely go. You'll learn something probably, and you'll definitely meet a lot of people.
Yep.
Let's wrap it up because I gotta go do other stuff. I have to get ready to go to Pittsburgh. Yay!
Yay.
So follow us on Twitter. We are at Linux Install, and of course we're on the Google Plus at google.com+ Linux Install Net. No dots, but in there. And you can find what else Walt's doing over at gvec.com. And you
Yay.
can find my other podcast, which is DevOps, of course, DevOps Mastery over at devopsmastery.com. And then we will have other links to the show notes to Greg's and my presentation, as well as other stuff. So definitely come check us out. What should everybody go do? Well,
Go install some Linux.
have a nice week, everybody.
See ya.